And Amy, we were talking about the game performance of Northwestern on Saturday against Gonzaga, the comeback that fell short, but
That was the best game. It was
very
exciting. A bad call, though.
Bad call.
You should know what goaltending is, shouldn't you?
The referees should, and they should see it, and they should take judicial. Well, it's not Zach Collins' fault. Take judicial notice of it when the refs, when the ref should take judicial notice of it when Chris Collins points it out. Of course, the NCAA conceded it after the game, which is
right.
What else could they do? It was obvious.
But that changed the whole momentum.
It did, no question. But those are the breaks.
Kids. The poor kids are still grieving.
In there, it was basically an emotional roller coaster. I think I cried and screamed and everything I could do.
Yeah, it was great.
Your
I know.
Fans are so smart. They're so nice. You have such nice people that go to Northwestern.
Converts make the greatest zealots. They learned of this game called basketball a week ago, and so they're very despondent over it. But March Madness, a conversation about basketball wouldn't be complete without talking about basketball in the city of Chicago, where we have some of the best players and the best teams. All of those best players will leave to go to other states, unfortunately, because of how bad it is here. Although maybe Chris Collins, maybe he could snag someone
Whitney Young student
from the state champion Whitney Young team that upset Simeon in the final over the weekend.
In overtime, too.
Yeah. So congratulations to Whitney Young. And, maybe a kid should think about Northwestern.
Are you being nice to your alma mater?
Well, I like to say.
Oh, my God. What is going on here?
Well, I respect the job Chris Collins has done with the basketball team. That is very limited compliment to Northwestern.
Baby steps, babies.
Yeah, right. All right. Speaking of baby steps, Obamacare repeal continues to make baby steps forward. The Hill over the weekend had a complete whip list of where Republicans stand on repeal. And remember, Republicans can only afford effectively 21 defections in the House and 2 in the Senate in terms of voting to move this to the president's desk. And Paul Ryan, recognizing that, has starting to retrench a bit over the weekend, particularly on the issue of support for older Americans as they transition from Obamacare to the new plan that's been proposed.
It's called the age tax, and it affects people from 50 to 64 who make $30,000 a year or less.
We believe that we do need to add some additional assistance to people in those older cohorts. If the person in their 50s and 60s does have additional health care costs than, say, a person in their 20s and 30s, the tax credit adjusts for that. But you're right in saying, and we agree, we believe we should have even more assistance, and that's one of the things we're looking at.
And today, President Trump is meeting with Paul Ryan and the architect of Obamacare, Zeke Emanuel.
Yeah. Republican Study Committee, Mark Walker, the chairman, said he and the 8 members of their steering committee are on board with Paul Ryan's plan. So that's another arrow in his quiver as Paul Ryan cobbles together the 218 he needs and then sends it over to the Senate. For more on this and other matters, we're pleased to be joined by Ed Morrissey, senior editor at hotair.com. Ed, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's great to be on with you guys again. Thanks.
So what's your handle? Do you see Paul Ryan making the necessary compromises to shepherd this over to the Senate ultimately?
Yeah, I think that they've been saying all along that they're willing to work on this, that this was a framework, and the White House has been very specific about that. They said that that they're open to hearing on amendments, and there were some amendments that were already in the pipeline that the Republican Study Committee endorsed in advance, which was rather unusual for the RSC to do. So I think that there's signals on all sides that there's room for compromise, at least in the House version. Over in the Senate side, I'm not necessarily as sanguine about that. That seems to be tripping over a lot of wires there. But I think what the White House is hoping to do there is to have the Senate use the House bill as a platform to pass something similar, but that is obviously going to have to be a little bit more moderate than what the House passed, and then to get the whole thing into a conference committee to resolve it. That's probably the path of least resistance. I don't know that you're going to be able to do a direct negotiation on a House bill that can pass the House that would just get rubber stamped in the Senate. I'm not necessarily sure that that's going to be possible, but clearly Ryan and the White House are looking for ways to make this as palatable as possible so that they can get at least 50 votes in the Senate. They can send Mike Pence down to the Senate to cast a tiebreaker I think the House is pretty much a done deal. I think that they'll get a passage in the House.
But what do Senators Tom Cotton and Rand Paul, what are they vying for? What do they want? What would get them on board?
Well, Rand Paul just wants a clean repeal. He wants everything repealed. And Tom Price yesterday said on ABC this week that that's simply not going to happen because it would leave too many people without any options. And the White House has said that they're not going to allow that to happen. So I don't think Rand Paul's ever going to get what he wants. The question is can you get everybody else but Rand Paul what they want? And I think that, when you're talking with Tom Cotton, he's raising some very good questions about perhaps the House Republicans are underestimating what can be accomplished through reconciliation, and that they should be bolder about that in order to test that out. But the Senate can be doing some of those things as well. And so when you get to a Senate bill, maybe they're going to get a little bit more aggressive on reconciliation. In order to, for those of you who haven't learned all you want to know and more about reconciliation, you have to show an immediate budgetary impact in order to avoid the filibuster, so you can pass bills with 51 votes. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to cram as much as they possibly can into reconciliation so they don't have to beat a Democratic filibuster. And the Senate seems to feel that there's more possibilities there than the House bill allows for, so they want the House to get bolder on some of this stuff. And that's what Tom Cotton's been talking about. I'm not necessarily sure that they're going to get that from the House.
On other matters where Trump needs to have a sense of urgency to maintain the promises that he made, it was interesting, an interview that Henry Cuellar, who is a Democrat congressman from Texas, did with investigative reporter Cheryl Atkinson on her Full Measure program, where he said that 30 countries are refusing to accept deportations of illegal immigrants who've committed serious crimes in this country, and we're not enforcing it. Cuellar telling Atkinson, we're not enforcing it, which is amazing, so now my intent is to go back to our committee on appropriations and affect their funding until they do that. This is something that Donald Trump made a point of in talking about his immigration policy as first and foremost a measure of public safety for American families. And these stories keep coming out about what's not being done and what the result is. 2 Maryland high school students who recently came here from Central America charged for raping a 14-year-old girl in a high school bathroom last week, Thursday. If we don't see material improvement and we continue to see these stories with respect to that first charge when it comes to reshaping immigration policy, removing people convicted of serious crimes, violent crimes from this country, if that doesn't come to fruition in the same timeline that we want to see Obamacare repeal and replace, at the same time we want to see tax reform, the Trump administration is going to have some splaining to do.
Well, yeah, and there's a pretty easy response to that. And bear in mind that the Trump administration really still just got there. I mean, they've only been in, today is 2 months. It's the 2-month mark today. So some of this stuff is also is I'm sure, in the works. It's being held up by a lack of progress on personnel issues. But what the Trump administration can do is it can suspend visas from countries that refuse to take back criminal, their own criminals, and they should. And Cuellar is right about that. We should be forcing that issue by suspending all visas from those countries, and that's completely within the executive branch's prerogative to do that. And Congress can force that, too. I mean, they can pass a statute that requires it, but the Trump administration could just do it on their own, and they should be doing that. And so you're right. Those are things that the Trump administration really does have to deliver on. I suspect, though, that the reason why it hasn't happened is not because of a lack of will, but just because of a lack of people. And they're still trying to get their feet underneath them in places like DHS. They still have a lot of appointees that they have to name for that agency, and my guess is that the slow going is keeping some of these executive-only prerogatives from being executed quickly.
All right, so today's a big day when James Comey, FBI director, heads up to the Hill for his hearing, and I think both sides on the weekend shows had said that there's no there. But how is Donald Trump going to process that? I mean, is he going to send out an angry tweet? Do you think he'll go off on Comey? Would he possibly fire James Comey?
He's not going to fire James Comey. That would be a meltdown situation on Capitol Hill, and James Comey is still got a lot of respect. You've got people from both sides angry with James Comey for different reasons, but he still has a tremendous amount of respect, and I don't think he's going to. I don't think he'll fire James Comey just simply because firing James Comey really isn't going to resolve the issue one way or the other. I think Trump's smarter than that. Angry tweets, sure. But I don't think he's going to fire James Comey. That's just way too much damage than what it's worth. I think the fact is that they overshot the mark with this claim, and eventually they're probably just going to stop talking about it. I don't think he'll ever apologize for it, but I think they'll just stop talking about it.
That'd be a start. He is Ed Morrissey, senior editor for HotAir.com. Thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.